Good morning, Samantha, or I don't know, it's morning with you, afternoon with me. Thank you very much for joining the Mint magazine to talk about your work.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me here, Henry. Nice to be with you today.
So you wrote the book on bioregional financing and have set up the BioFi Collective. I just wondered if we sort of start for a bit of your sort of journey from, say, the World Bank and nature finance to get to this point.
Sure. That's a long journey. Let's see what feels relevant to share in this moment. I identify as a regenerative economist these days, and my training is in conventional neoclassical economics. But in grad school, I started studying climate finance, and the Paris Agreement was passed when I was in grad school. So, starting in graduate school, I was working as an intern in the US Treasury Department, and both there and in my studies, I was looking at how to design a global financial architecture aligned with achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. So, directing financial flows away from fossil fuels and from continued deforestation and towards investing in a renewable energy economy in the transition and investing in protecting life. And so I started asking that question um, about 10 years ago, and my research has focused on that ever since. And after graduate school, I ended up at the World Bank and was working in a team called the Long-Term Finance Team. And we were working with large institutional investors, some of the largest in the world, often pension funds or sovereign wealth funds, to look at how they could shift their portfolios away from a portfolio that is destroying the economy, that they need to be intact to pay their pensioners or the citizens of their country decades from now, and how they could start investing in an economy that supports rather than destroys biodiversity. And we were looking at the risks of the status quo in their current portfolios and investing in kind of a broad market for portfolio of bonds and public equities, and how they could shift to investing in protecting old growth forest and the biodiversity hotspots that are left on Earth. And in 2020, I was one of the authors on the World Bank's first paper on mobilizing private finance for nature. So that was a 100-page report that we published kind of right in the middle of the pandemic. And my work has been very focused on financing nature regeneration ever since. And eventually it evolved to focus on financing true biocultural regeneration. So, not separating out the ecological regeneration from the cultural regeneration, but seeing humans as the amazing and capable stewards that we are, and looking at how we can fund the work of so many amazing people, so many incredible grassroots groups around the world that are already doing this work of biocultural regeneration. And, many of them have been for decades, if not millennia, in the case of indigenous peoples. And increasingly, it's hard for them to make ends meet and do that work within the global capitalist system. So I started looking at how we can channel resources from the increasingly centralized pools of capital around the world, and including, certainly institutional investors, but also corporations and foundations, to this very decentralized mycelial web of regeneration happening and seeing that money was only getting to kind of larger scale nature projects that were really still embedded in the capitalist paradigm and power structures and weren't getting to the highest integrity grassroots projects on the ground. So that is what I've been working on for the past couple of years with writing the book, and then launching the BioFi project, which is a think and do tank, a nonprofit think and do tank that I'm the director of.
Brilliant. Well, maybe just step back, because what I'm sort of quite interested is how the stories you have told these potential people providing finance have evolved maybe over the time. Because the key thing, obviously, to someone who is going to finance is, well, what's the rationale in terms of the nature of returns, the scale of returns, the timing of returns, the uncertainty of returns, all those sorts of dimensions. And has that story evolved since the World Bank? How did it start when you were trying to
Absolutely.
persuade these pension funds to invest in old growth forests?
Yeah, when I was at the World Bank, we were often bringing a risk lens and supporting these institutional investors, but I was also advising this group of 89 finance ministries from around the world and a group of more than 100 central banks from around the world to take a broader, longer term lens to how they look at financial risk and to realize that systemic risk is impacted by the investments that we make, even though, financial theory that most financial decisions are based on says you can't control for systemic risk. So you shouldn't bother worry about it. You should just invest in a diversified portfolio of assets. So we were trying to get the institutions that we were working with, policymakers, central banks, institutional investors to take a more holistic view of the risk that they're paying attention to. And we were publishing a variety of reports around those risks and looking at how the economy is built on a stable biosphere. And if you destroy the biosphere, the entire economy is going to collapse. And that is a risk worth paying attention to, even if you can't fully quantify it in your models. Um, so I was working on that, and then there was an argument to institutional investors, but also smaller private equity funds that it was very important that they invested in nature conservation, regeneration, and that indeed life is regenerative and there can be returns generated from investing in life. And after I left the World Bank, I went to work for an asset manager called Ethic that was building a nature fund, a private equity fund focused on investing in nature regeneration projects. And I spent some time scoping out different projects for them and saw, as I mentioned earlier, that they were gravitating to projects that were $5 million or above and
Yeah.
were often owned by companies from the global north, even if they were in the global south. So they weren't grassroots owned and led projects. And they were projects that, often Ethic wanted to see generating double-digit returns. And I felt that there's a need to invest in projects that produce a more holistic range of returns, not just financial returns. And I'm a systems thinker, and so I'm always looking at the nested holes and the whole system. And yes.
Just to go back, in terms of, I suppose, the standard returns from landscape nature regeneration, those would be from selling credits, carbon and biodiversity credits for offset schemes, fundamentally, wouldn't they?
Or producing regeneratively produced commodities or ecotourism, educational experiences. There are a whole range of financial returns that can be generated. And in our Mobilizing Private Finance for Nature report that came out in 2020, we show all of the different ways of generating revenue from investing in nature regeneration. And I spent a lot of time when I was at the World Bank looking at eco credit markets and natural asset companies and all the different ways to monetize nature and to generate financial returns from those investments. And ultimately, I observed that many, if not all of these structures were perpetuating um, the old systems, the old paradigm of extraction and profit maximization, and not looking at a holistic set of returns. And so in the BioFi book, you probably observed that we use the common land for returns framework, where we talk about first investing in inspiration. And that's kind of step one. You have to inspire people to engage in biocultural regeneration. And then from there, once they start acting, you often receive ecological benefits. So the people that live there are drinking cleaner water and swimming in cleaner water and breathing cleaner air and eating healthier food. And from there are all these social benefits. People are healthier, they're happier, they're outside more, they're more engaged in their community, they're meeting their neighbors. And so there's more social resilience to when there is crisis or a natural disaster. And from there, financial and economic returns are generated. People are more productive, they're more engaged. There are economic benefits from starting regenerative enterprises that are doing the ecological regeneration work, doing educational work, but you don't start with a focus on financial returns. That is part of a larger set of returns. And so in many ways, the BioFi work aims to bring in a new theory of value and to ask what wealth truly is. And we believe that it's not just money, and indeed the window in which money is worth something is rapidly closing. And we have a short window in which we can invest money in a livable future. And if we don't do that, then pretty quickly the optionality tokens that are money aren't going to be able to buy us any viable options. And so really bringing in this new theory of value and the provocation that assessment of value should be place-based, and it should not be, just top down by a central bank or another authority that's printing money, but it should be based on the values of a particular community and their relationship to their place and their vision for what wealth looks like in their place.
Well, I suppose, I mean, I think, that all makes a huge amount of sense, but our financial system's not organized like that, is it? And the players and organizations in it don't, they have to play the game that they're set up to play in terms of maximizing returns and so on. So,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I don't think there's any have to here. I think we're living through the sixth mass extinction, and we're living through large scale ecological and social collapse. And I think everything needs to be reevaluated. And certainly the premises at the center of our financial system that are destroying our only home. So that's what the BioFi work tries to do, is tries to say we need to reevaluate these fundamental assumptions and build a new layer in the global financial system that can help to take that capital from the old system and put it in service to communities that know the type of regeneration that is worth investing in and that can create holistic and lasting wealth.
I was saying by have to, I just meant that, I mean, a bit like if you're playing football, you've got to kick the ball and into the goal. If you start playing a different game, then everyone looks at you and you're thrown off the field, if you like.
Mhm.
And so there's a certain set of rules that obviously continued and made up by the players of what people in pensions, in finance more generally, are meant to be doing. That if they start not following those. I mean, they might have a hedge fund coming in with an aggressive takeover. So, well, we've seen what happened to Unilever when they tried to shift in, and Danone, when they tried to shift in different directions, they just got aggressive takeovers and have their agendas killed. So I was wondering, do you have particular financial institutions who are committed to investing in line with a sort of bioregional, multiple benefits, sort of et cetera, lens?
Yeah, and you might be a bit disappointed to hear this, but we really believe that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and that it's important that we don't bring too much capital into a bioregional financing facility until the community and the projects underneath it are ready to receive that money and to put it in service to a vision that they've developed collectively. And oftentimes, to get those projects ready to receive larger amounts of capital, you need philanthropic capital initially, or a mix of philanthropic capital and some very patient impact investing investment that requires kind of single-digit returns often. So initially, we're working mostly with foundations and family offices. Some of the teams that we're working with have gotten public grants at the municipal level. So that's kind of the pool of resources that we're focused on initially. And for the bioregional fund that we're helping to build in the Amazon, there's a big focus there on tapping into multilateral grants. So the Tropical Forest Forever facility, the Kali Fund. So initially, it's a lot of money that is not requiring a financial return to build out the portfolio. And then there's a vision that there will be these venture studios that create portfolios of regenerative enterprises, and then impact investment can come in and some financial return can be generated. But we're not looking to work with those institutions that have such strict fiduciary duty requirements. These types of portfolios aren't necessarily a fit for their legal mandates. And of course, this is a framework that's being adapted by many people in many places all over the world. And so, there might be someone who's called to work more closely with institutional investors to design a portfolio that does meet their needs. But in terms of the BioFi project and what we're actively focusing our time, energy, attention on, we're focusing on kind of the early stage, more catalytic, what are the highest leverage projects in the bioregion and how do those collect together in a systemic way to create a whole greater than the sum of their parts. And initially, what those entities need are legal and governance support and some kind of philanthropic seed capital to get them going.
I was sort of interested because in your book, I did look particularly at to what extent you saw capital coming from out with the community, if you like, or the bioregions, and to what extent you saw it by releasing it sort of locally, if you like.
Yeah.
And quite often, there's a sort of critique of what might be called deficit development, where you go in a place and see what's missing, and which is typical sort of north-south development. You go to Africa and you say, oh, they're lacking this, they're lacking that, they'll have to have something. Whereas rather, as opposed to going to somewhere and saying, well, what do you have? And how can you use the resources, the assets, the collaboration, the etc., and build from the bottom up? And that obviously retains the sort of control, because almost no finance comes without strings, in the bioregion around what they might want out of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that this will look different in different places, and certainly whether you're working in the global south, a geography that has historically experienced the brunt of colonialism and its extraction, or you're working in the global north where there's been all this hoarding going on for the past couple of centuries, the need to bring in external capital differs. And we're focused in the Americas right now. So we just ran this learning journey, 6-month learning and design journey with 22 teams from across the Americas. So about half were in North America, all the way from Alaska to Mexico, and then Central America, all the way down to Argentina. And certainly the teams in the global north are more focused on mobilizing resources from within their bioregion and redistributing the resources that are already there, often working with government, working with corporations, working to engage high net worth individuals in their bioregion. And in the global south, there is definitely a need to bring in resources from the global north through foundations, through multilateral pools of resources, like I mentioned. But in every place, we start with asset and risk mapping, mapping the most relevant and urgent risks in that particular bioregion, and developing a portfolio that can meet and mitigate those risks, and then mapping the assets that are already there and that are within the teams that we're working with, and looking at how we can unlock those assets. So we take a multi-capital approach. We're not only focused on financial capital, but we look at the other forms of capital that are in these bioregions, and how those forms of capital can grow and can serve the vision of the bioregional organizing team and the bioregional financing facility. And in the book, you might remember that we share this idea of bioregional tithing, and certainly in many places there is a history of tithing to religious institutions that people are quite comfortable with and often do without really questioning or thinking about, right? And so we, introduce this idea of like, if we really want our place, our watershed, our bioregion to be our lifeboat, and to hold us and take care of us and our families as we're entering into an increasingly unstable period on Earth, that maybe we need to invest in regeneration. And maybe we're not getting out there and doing a riparian restoration project every weekend, or transitioning conventional agriculture to regenerative agriculture. But there are people in our bioregion who are, and why wouldn't we, if our survival, our health, our well-being, that of our children is tied to it, want to give them some money every month for that service that they're providing. And so, to introduce this, it's really kind of a marketing, storytelling, identity building campaign. And we hope for more bioregions to tap into that, and to realize that there are a lot of resources where they are, and bringing people into a shared narrative and a shared purpose can help to unlock those resources.
Can you give me a specific, just to make this really concrete for someone who might be listening to this, example in a particular bioregion of the sort of things you're planning underway, are sort of most developed, if you like?
Sure, yeah. So at the end of the BioFi Cultivator, this 6-month learning and design journey that I mentioned, 18 of the 22 teams that participated had bioregional financing facilities in some form that they presented and began fundraising for. And so we have 18 8-minute presentations of all of those on our website. You can watch the recording, you can see their deck, and you can see the plurality of these bioregional financing facilities. So they look very different in different places, but in the book, we introduce this concept, this template of the bioregional trust is kind of the foundational bioregional financing facility that can make investments that can then create the foundation for the other bioregional financing facilities, a venture studio, an investment company, a bank to come later on. So almost all of the teams in the cultivator are focused on the bioregional trust. Some called it a bioregional fund. So it's a catalytic grant facility. Some of the teams created a revolving loan facility within their bioregional trust, but it is kind of building these synergistic portfolios of projects within the bioregion that can take in larger amounts of capital, including return seeking, impact investment capital over time.
I just wonder what the projects were actually specifically, because presumably,
What
once you've got
types
a
of
facility,
projects
you've got to
underneath?
actually, what sort of projects are people picking up on
Yeah.
that they feel might be viable economically, if you like.
Yeah, and viable economically is probably different in our frame than a traditional frame. But I'll give an example too of
I say
the bio.
generally viable, then not sort of
Okay.
social economic.
Yeah, we're reinventing economics as we speak. So, what that means is changing. We work with two of the teams that went through our cultivator very closely, and spend a lot of time in their bioregions, building relationships from them, learning about the types of projects that are happening there. And so I'll give examples of each of them. So the first is a team that's created a bioregional fund called Salmon Returns, and they're working in the historic spawning territory of the Pacific salmon, so from Alaska to Central California. And they're focusing on a few watersheds initially within the bioregion. And one of the watersheds that they're working in is the Klamath River Basin, where they've just had the biggest dam removal in US history. And so the salmon came back last year after more than 100 years of this dam being there and them not being able to swim upstream. They, of course, remember and went right back to the headwaters of this river. And so there is this regenerative potential that's been unlocked with the dams being removed, the salmon coming back. There are some large land back projects to the Yurok tribe, one of the First Nations in the area that played a huge role in getting this dam removed. And they are working on regenerating their culture, regenerating their language. They're getting some of their land back. And, often that land has been heavily logged. There's been a real lack of care, if not full-on destruction on this land. And so they're investing in reforestation. They're investing in boats and redwood canoes to bring back their cultural heritage, to educate visitors that come about the role of redwood canoes and Yurok culture. They're building fishing camps and fish processing facilities, and farms and food distribution infrastructure. So we're currently engaged with some of the folks from the Yurok tribe and from Salmon Returns to map their portfolio of projects in the Klamath River Basin. And then I'll give another example in the Amazon Headwaters. We're working with the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, which is an alliance of 30 indigenous nations across the headwaters of the Amazon. And there are a mix of projects that are strictly focused on, kind of grant capital. And then there are some eco enterprises that are being formed. So I'll talk about each of them. So in the eco enterprise front, there's a solar canoe company, Cara Solar, that is there, that is growing, that is trying to bring solar powered canoes to the people of the Amazon. So there's not this dependence on fossil fuels and needing to constantly import those fossil fuels. And of course, it pollutes the river. There is a vanilla project that is growing where different communities are wanting to invest in these greenhouses where they can grow and hand pollinate vanilla. Fundación Pachamama is a foundation down there that's really working to catalyze this project. And we got to go visit the initial pilot project in Puyo, Ecuador in March. But this is something that they hope to spread across the territories. And then there's a very cool jaguar biocultural credit in Achuar territory in the Amazon, where these communities are using jaguars as an indicator species to assess the health of the entire landscape and to assess the efficacy of their forest stewardship program. So they've put in place bans on hunting, self-imposed, and different forest stewardship programs within Achuar territory. And they've developed their own holistic set of indicators for, what activities are they engaging in to be better stewards of the forest and all of the wildlife there. And then how do they measure the health of that, including the presence of jaguars on the landscape? And so they are selling these credits through a platform called Regen Network. And one of the initial buyers is the Jaguar Tequila Company, which has been using the likeness of the Jaguar for their entire lifetime as a tequila company. And they want to support the health of jaguars and the well-being of the people that are taking care of the forest in which jaguars live. Those credits have also been purchased by a range of individuals and foundations. And then there are so many other educational projects across the Amazon. There's a living school of the Amazon that was recently started, which is the first school in that part of the Amazon for Indigenous people by Indigenous people. It's an Indigenous education program teaching the young people about territorial defense and using drones and satellite images and all these things to defend their territory from mining and logging and other activities like that. So these are some of the projects that the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Bioregional Fund will be investing in.
Brilliant. They will sound very exciting. I was wondering how the theme of our issue for the moment is commoning, and I'm also talking to David Bollier, who you know well, and he suggested talking to you as well. I just wonder how you see what you're doing. How do you see the relationship of that with the commoning movement as such?
Fantastic. I love that question. And we are hosting a retreat starting tomorrow that David will be attending in the Berkshires on regenerative economics, bioregional finance, and what we're calling recommoning. So absolutely, we see these things as quite intertwined. And the way commoning has shown up in the bioregional financing facility design work so far is through a group purchasing a town square and investing in its revitalization, and purchasing the same group also a firehouse and building a co-working space and coffee shop and an indoor commons for the bioregion. So these bioregional financing facilities are often being used to purchase land, to purchase buildings or leases to buildings, and to provide space for people to engage in the pattern and in practice of commoning again. So a bioregional financing facility can be a legal container that can own the commons and form protocols for governing that commons. And so, in many ways are applying the principles that David has developed over decades through his research, and figuring out what that looks like in their unique place and what are the commons that they want to invest in first and foremost that can hopefully unlock bigger commons over time, and more people perhaps even giving their land to the bioregional fund to be governed as a commons. But we definitely have some big outstanding questions around all of this, and how it looks in practice. And as these bioregional financing facilities are coming online, how do we get more land into them that allows people to practice that commoning? And those are some of the questions we'll be exploring with David this week.
Yes, I wonder about the tension, I suppose, between the idea of commoning being very bottom up and bottom up governance control, and obviously, if you then take finance from externally from other players, almost no finance comes without some sort of controls, governance, etc., attached to it. That reduces the control, if you like, of the commoners.
We are hoping that these bioregional financing facilities can be a kind of membrane that helps, whoever the capital holder is that is investing in them to release a level of control. And one of the attributes that bioregional financing facilities are trying to work to is shifting power imbalances that are so inherent in capitalism, right? Where capital is supreme and whoever the capital holder is has ultimate control over how that money is governed. And the theory behind BioFi says, we are in a moment of great peril, and the people that know best how to get us, onto a better path are the people that are living very close to the land and are stewarding that land and are stewarding healthy regenerative culture. And we need to trust them. We need to give them some resources and trust them to invest in, what many of them have been doing for quite a long time. And so, we're looking at different ways to build that trust with capital providers so that, they feel bought into the vision, but they don't feel a need to control the day-to-day decisions, or require some really burdensome reporting processes. But there is more trust of place-based intelligence and the emergence of regeneration in a given place. And one way we recommend to do that is to really build deep relationships with them and invite them there to see the projects and to pour their blood, sweat, and tears to the projects. So to do shared work, shared projects together, and to engage in ceremony or ritual that connects them with the healing and regeneration work happening there.
Well, that sounds very interesting. I wonder, are there any sort of existing sort of traditions? I thought in the US, there are more local banking and maybe other local pension funds. Or, I mean, I've always wondered whether if you could, the people who are getting the financial returns are actually living in the community and feel that their interests are wider than the financial returns, because obviously they've just got the financial returns, but the environment, the bioregion they live in is falling to bits, not going to help them much. Are there sort of potential to bring those sort of interests together?
Absolutely. And there's a template for a bioregional bank, and it builds on the Community Development Financial Institution, CDFI model that's quite popular in the US. That's a little bit under attack by the Trump administration right now, but has been very successful in financing small businesses and nonprofits and other entities doing very impactful work, often at the margins that are otherwise locked out of the financial system, Native communities that don't have collateral to get loans in a conventional bank. And the vision is that, eventually the citizens of the bioregion would want to make their deposits in a bioregional bank that's investing in projects happening in that bioregion. But certainly you need the portfolio of projects to be at a place that it's ready to take in that sort of capital and can deliver, the types of returns that those depositors would want.
Which hopefully go beyond just the financial.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. That's been a fantastic. I know you've covered a huge amount of space in a very short, relatively short time, but hopefully that's a really good taster. And we will put a link to your biofinance book in there as well, so people can follow up and obviously can also join BioFi as well and learn more. But thank you very much for your time. It's been really interesting.
Thank you so much, Henry. Yeah, there's a free version of the ebook on the website. You can also order the print version. The book is also available in Spanish. And we have our BioFi community of practice, a community of almost 700 people and growing. We have calls about once a month where we dive into a particular aspect of BioFi, and you can join us there.
Brilliant. Well, I'm certainly a member of it, and I look forward to doing that.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Henry.